I'm Ellie, and this is where my journey begins. I grew up in a small town, moving from one foster home to another until I finally found a place with the Thompsons. They gave me the priceless gift of stability, something I had longed for all my life. Life was pretty plain until I headed to college, becoming the first in my foster family to venture into the big city. I immersed myself in studying languages, with Japanese being my focus. After working tirelessly, I landed a job as a translator at an international trading company, a huge achievement for a small-town girl like me. One ordinary Tuesday, I walked into a cozy cafe near my office and ordered my usual black coffee. That's when I saw him. Jack, tall and with a smile that could light up a room. He was on his phone, looking all business yet somehow relaxed. When our eyes met, I felt an undeniable connection. "Hey, I've never seen you here before," I said, trying to sound casual as I settled into my seat with my coffee. He looked up, his smile widening. "Just trying to escape the office chaos." "I'm Jack," he said, extending his hand. I shook it and felt a spark. "I'm Ellie. So what brings Mr. Escape the office to my favorite spot?" I asked, intrigued. "Good coffee and better company, it seems," he quipped, and from that moment, we hit it off. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and before we knew it, a year had passed. Our conversations had evolved beyond coffee chats. Jack was a city guy, charming and worldly, but we both knew life wasn't always smooth sailing. After a year of dating, we decided to get married, and I was over the moon. I wanted him to meet the Thompsons, the people who shaped me into who I am. My foster parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were salt-of-the-earth types who lived simply and worked hard. They had been fixing up their house, so they rented a tiny apartment that was nothing special but filled with warmth and love. "It may not be much, but it's filled with good memories," I told Jack. He nodded, but I caught the look in his eyes as he scanned the cramped space. He was clearly uncomfortable. We spent the weekend there, and my folks treated him like royalty, but Jack was distant, always checking his watch, eager to return to the city. As we drove home that Sunday night, the silence in the car felt heavy. "Jack, you've been quiet. What's up?" I finally asked. He sighed, clearly reluctant to speak. "Look, Ellie, your folks are nice, but we come from different worlds," he said, his words steaming. I fought to keep my composure. "What does that mean?" "It's just different. I'm not used to this simple life," he admitted, trying to smooth things over quickly. I turned to look out the window, biting my lip as I considered the differences between our lives. "Jack, I don't need fancy things, but we have to respect where we both come from," I said firmly. He nodded. "Right. Of course, I love you, Ellie. That's what matters," he said, but a part of me wondered if we truly understood each other. That night, I lay awake, reflecting on the simple life I cherished and the complicated world I was stepping into. Just days after our awkward visit to my childhood home, it was my turn to meet Jack's side of the family, his mother, Vivian. High-rise apartment in the city center was decked out in lavish decor that screamed wealth. When we arrived, she greeted us at the door, dressed in designer clothes from head to toe, and her apartment looked like something out of a magazine. "Ellie, isn't it? And what is it you do?" Vivian asked, sizing me up as if I were a product she was considering. "I'm a translator. I work with Japanese clients at a trading company," I replied, trying to sound confident. "Oh, impressive," she said with a half smile, but her eyes were scanning me for flaws. When I mentioned my background and my foster parents, her expression shifted. "From the province and fostered, you say? That doesn't seem quite fitting for my Jack." Jack jumped in quickly. "Mom, please. Ellie's wonderful and I love her. We're getting married." "Married? When's this happening? How are you planning it?" Vivian's tone changed to one that felt a bit too invasive. "We're thinking of something small and intimate. Just us in Hawaii," I said, hoping to highlight the romance. Her eyes nearly bulged. "Hawaii? Just the two of you?" "No, that won't do. What will my friends think if I can't even throw my only son a proper wedding?" I tried to stay calm. "It's our day, Vivian. We just want something that feels true to us, without all the fuss." That was the tipping point. She huffed and declared the discussion over, walking out of the room. Jack glanced at me, his expression apologetic, and whispered, "Let me talk to her. We'll sort this out." 4 months flew by, and despite the rocky start, there we were in Hawaii, ready to say, "I do." It was supposed to be an intimate ceremony, just Jack and me, but of course, Vivian had other plans. She showed up, camera in hand, eager to capture every moment. It felt like she was lurking, ensuring she had plenty to post online. Jack seemed oblivious, basking in the sun and the joy of the ceremony. I tried to smile through it, leaning in to whisper, "I thought it would be just us." He squeezed my hand, his eyes sincere. "I know, I'm sorry, she's just excited. Let's try to enjoy our day." But Vivian was buzzing around us, her phone always up, shouting, "Smile here. Oh, this will look fabulous on my feed." I felt like a prop in her social media showcase rather than a bride on her wedding day. What was meant to be our special moment had turned into just another one of Vivian's extravagant productions. Coming home as newlyweds should have been about cozy, love-filled days. Breakfast in bed, slow dances in the living room, the works. At least it started that way. Jack slipped a stunning ring on my finger the day we got back, one that caught the light and sparkled endlessly. "It's been in my family for generations," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "Be careful with that ring. It's more than just expensive, it's an heirloom." Vivian chimed in, hovering over us like a dark cloud on a sunny day. Her reminder felt more like a warning, making my heart sink a little. The first few weeks, Jack and I were in our blissful bubble, stealing kisses and cooking together. But then Vivian started dropping by unannounced, like a storm that had settled over our home. It all began one afternoon when I was folding laundry, and the doorbell rang. There she was, that familiar look on her face, as if she were about to inspect a military base. "Just checking in on my favorite newlyweds," she said, but her eyes darted around the apartment as if she were searching for something wrong. I tried to be polite, making small talk, even as she wandered into the kitchen, her fingers gliding over every surface. "Ellie, darling, do you ever clean? And where are the fresh vegetables? A man needs his greens." Her tone dripped with disapproval. Jack just shrugged it off later when I told him, "She means well, babe. Just try to go with it." Go with it. My frustration bubbled up. "Jack, she's treating me like I'm on trial in my own home." He kissed my forehead casually as if that would solve everything. "She's lonely, Ellie. Let's cut her some slack." But that slack turned into something else entirely. It escalated until one day I came home late from work, riding high on the excitement of signing a major contract with a new client from Japan. That is, until I found Vivian in my living room, an uninvited storm brewing. "I heard you've been spending a lot of time at that office late nights." She raised an eyebrow, her voice thick with suspicion. "Yeah, it's a big project. Lots of new opportunities," I tried to explain, but she clearly had other ideas. 2 days later, she personally showed up at my office, counting the men working with me out loud and loudly suggesting I could be having an affair with one of them. Without invitation, she barged into my boss's office, eyeing him because he was elderly, and declared, "Well, she definitely won't mess with the old man." I was mortified, my face burning as red as a beetroot. I demanded she leave and apologized profusely to my boss and colleagues for the disruption. Thankfully, Mr. Jackson had a sense of humor and just laughed it off. But the damage was done. That night, I lay awake, wondering how we'd gotten here. I'd had enough. I cornered Jack in our bedroom, my voice low and tense. "Your mom crossed the line today, Jack. She's accusing me of cheating, and it has to stop." He sighed deeply, weariness etched on his face. "Please just try to get along for me." But getting along increasingly felt like just putting up with nonsense. Things between Jack and me were getting rocky, largely due to Vivian's constant whispers in his ear. Jack had begun to nitpick everything about me, my clothing choices, my work hours. He had never minded before, but suddenly everything was an issue. "Ellie, why do you have to wear that to work?" He frowned one morning as I got ready. I was simply wearing a blouse and skirt, nothing fancy. "It's professional, Jack. What's wrong with it?" I replied, adjusting my skirt. "It's too much. You're just inviting comments from all those guys." His tone had a sharp edge, and I realized this was about more than just my outfit. This became a regular occurrence, but it peaked on my birthday. My boss gave me a small gift, just a book with a note that read, "To my practically daughter." It was an innocent, kind gesture, but Jack blew it out of proportion. "You see? That's exactly what I'm talking about. Why is he giving you gifts?" "It's not right, Ellie." Jack was furious when he saw the book. "It's just a book. He's like a father figure to me." I tried to explain, but Jack's eyes were clouded with suspicion, all thanks to Vivian's meddling. The tension at home had become unbearable, so I was relieved to head out on a business trip to a neighboring city. Our company was setting up a new factory, and I looked forward to a break from the drama. The trip went smoothly, and I was wrapping up with dinner alongside our Japanese partners when I noticed shadows lurking near the restaurant. My heart raced as I walked toward my hotel. The dimly lit street made me uneasy, and the shadows crept closer. Panicked, I asked two colleagues to walk me back. As we neared the hotel entrance, the light from the lanterns revealed who was following me: Jack and Vivian. "What the hell, Jack? What are you doing here?" I blurted out, unable to hide my shock. Vivian stepped forward, her expression twisted in anger. "We're making sure you're not up to any trouble. We can't trust you around all these men," she spat. My colleagues stared in disbelief, and I felt my face burn with embarrassment. "This is ridiculous. You're both acting like I'm some kind of criminal." But Vivian wasn't having it. "I'll be telling your parents about this. They should know what kind of woman you've turned out to be." I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. "Go ahead. They'll laugh you out of town." The ride back was silent. Jack and his mother sat in the front, leaving me alone in the back seat, staring out the window as city lights blurred into streaks of color. Tears filled my eyes. I was married to the man I loved, yet I felt trapped in a nightmare, with Vivian as the relentless specter that wouldn't go away. When Vivian actually followed through on her threat and showed up at my parents' place, I was in disbelief. I couldn't believe it when Mom called, her voice trembling as she recounted the situation. "She's here, Ellie," my mother said, tone strained. "She demanded to see your father right away." So, I gave her the address to his workshop, my heart sinking as I realized how far this had gone. I felt my stomach drop as my mom spoke. "Dad's at his workshop, where he spends most of his days crafting and creating. He's truly in his element," she continued, her voice steady but laced with tension. "Your mother-in-law went there and saw your father in his work clothes, stained from the glass." She just scoffed. I gripped the phone tighter, bracing myself for what was coming next. "When your father went over to greet her, he apologized for not shaking her hand. His hands were all stained from work, you know." She looked at his hands. Ellie made a face and said something awful about coming to this backwater for nothing. My heart sank further as I listened. "She says she understands now why you turned out the way you did and just left without another word." "Thanks for telling me, Mom. I need to think about what to do." I hung up, feeling a tumult of anger and hurt swirling inside me. It wasn't long before Vivian made her next move. The very next day, she cornered me in the living room, her eyes cold and judgmental. "Ellie, now I see where you get your manners, or should I say, lack thereof. Your father is just an ordinary worker, his hands permanently dirtied. What kind of upbringing, what kind of manners could you possibly teach any children?" I shuddered at her words. They struck me like daggers. But before I could respond, Jack walked in. Instead of defending me, he went straight to his mother, taking her in his arms. "Mom, I'm sorry about all this. Ellie's family, they're just different from us." That was it. The last straw. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Different? Is that your way of saying my family isn't good enough for your high standards?" My voice broke, the hurt too deep. Jack looked at me, his eyes empty. "It's just how things are, Ellie. We come from different worlds." "So that's it, huh?" My voice rose, thick with emotion. "If I'm such a disgrace, why don't we just end this? If I'm so beneath you, let's get a divorce." Vivian's eyes lit up, almost gleefully. "Well, that sounds like a splendid idea." Jack just nodded passively. "Maybe that's for the best." I spent the night in our guest room, tears streaming down my face as Vivian's every word replayed in my mind. Each dismissive glance from Jack, the life I thought we were building, it all felt like a lie. The early morning light filtered through the blinds, casting a soft glow across the room as I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand. It was time to make some difficult but necessary calls. First on my list was my boss, Mr. Jackson, whose kindness had always made the stresses of work bearable. "Mr. Jackson, it's Ellie," I started, my voice shaky. "I'm facing some personal issues and need to take some time off. I can take it unpaid if necessary." "Ellie," he replied quickly, concern evident in his voice. "You're one of our most valuable team members. Take a paid vacation, sort things out, and come back when you're ready. We'll manage here." His generosity brought a lump to my throat. "Thank you, Mr. Jackson. I can't tell you how much this means to me." Next, I dialed my mother, who had always been my anchor in any storm. As soon as she answered, I spilled everything, my words tumbling out in a torrent of emotion. "Mom, it's all falling apart here. I can't do this anymore with Jack and his mom. It's just too much." Her voice was calm and soothing. "Ellie, we've been prepared for this call. Your father and I are on our way. Just pack what you need." As I ended the call, I glanced around the room, my eyes landing on the few personal items I brought into this house, none of which felt like they belonged. I started packing, each item a reminder of the life I thought I'd build with Jack. Vivian appeared at the doorway, her presence like a dark cloud. "Remember, Ellie, only take what you bought with your own money. Don't think about grabbing anything else," she said, her voice cold and accusatory. It wasn't long before I heard the gravel crunch under the tires of an old vehicle. Looking out the window, I saw the familiar beat-up pickup truck that belonged to my parents. Jack and Vivian followed me outside, their expressions a mixture of smugness and curiosity. As my parents' truck pulled up, Jack scoffed loudly. "Sure that old thing will even make it back?" My father stepped out, a quiet strength emanating from him as he faced Jack without a word. He handed over the divorce papers, his eyes steady and unwavering. Jack grabbed the papers and signed them with a smirk, his mother chuckling beside him, glad to be rid of this mess. We arrived at my parents' home, a large, imposing structure that felt more like a sanctuary now. I spent the next few hours unpacking and trying to settle my nerves. The peace of the familiar surroundings slowly calmed me. That evening, as I sat looking out at the garden, my phone rang. It was Vivian. "Ellie, you need to return the ring. It's a family heirloom, not a parting gift." I held the phone away for a moment, taking a deep breath before responding. "Vivian, that ring was given to me as a wedding gift. If you want it, come and get it yourself." The morning light was just beginning to spill over the horizon. When I spotted Jack and his mother, Vivian, from the upstairs window, they stood at the gate, staring up at the house as if they had wandered into a fairy tale. Their expressions of disbelief were almost comical. A smirk crept across my lips as I watched them from behind the curtain. They looked so out of place against the backdrop of my large, meticulously landscaped front yard, their confusion palpable. I turned away from the window, hearing my parents downstairs, and joined them. We shared a knowing glance before stepping outside. Calm and collected, my parents walked past Jack and Vivian without a word, heading straight for the garage. They pretended not to notice the bewildered stares from my estranged husband and his mother. As the garage door swung open, revealing 3 sleek, high-end cars, I could hear Jack's sharp intake of breath. My father chose a gleaming black sedan, and we all climbed in. Just as we were about to pull out of the driveway, Jack finally found his voice. "Ellie, what is all this? This house? These cars?" I stepped out of the car, approaching them with a calm I hadn't felt in months. "This is my family home, Jack. My father owns a glass factory and several commercial properties. This is where I grew up." Vivian's face contorted in confusion. "But your father, he was wearing work clothes. His hands were dirty." I couldn't help but smile at her naivety. "Yes, Vivian, he was launching a new product line. It's a tradition in his company to get involved hands-on. It doesn't mean he's not successful or wealthy." They stood there, stunned, unable to reconcile the image of the hard-working man they'd seen with the opulence surrounding them. At that moment, a group of neighbors approached, their faces bright with smiles. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson. We heard about your latest charity event. It's wonderful what you're doing, and you've got our support in the mayoral elections." One of them called out cheerfully. My parents nodded and thanked them, while Jack's face twisted with a mixture of awe and regret, his eyes darting between his mother and me. Vivian looked as though she had swallowed something bitter, her earlier arrogance washed away by the undeniable reality before her. I turned back to the car, giving Jack and Vivian one last look. "Well, I guess you see things a little differently now," I said, not unkindly. Their expressions of shock and realization confirmed that the past, with all its hardships and heart-hatches, was finally behind me. But before I could savor the moment, Jack made his move. He shoved his mother aside with such force that she stumbled. "It's all your fault, you know. You pushed her away with your nonsense," he shouted at her, bitterness lacing his words. Turning to me, his demeanor shifted completely. He rushed over, trying to pull me to an embrace, his hands reaching out as if he could erase everything with a simple touch. "Ellie, please listen to me. We were good together, weren't we? I love you. I really do," he pleaded, his voice a desperate whisper. I recoiled from his touch. The warmth we once shared had long been extinguished by his betrayal. "Stop, Jack. Just stop," I said firmly, pushing him away with all the strength I could muster. Quickly, I got into the car, my heart pounding. Without a word, my father pressed the remote control, and the garage doors began to close behind us. Jack and Vivian stood there, calling out, their voices a blend of desperation and disbelief. Ellie, please forgive us. We didn't mean any of it. Jack yelled, his voice cracking. Vivian, scrambling for the dignity she'd lost, joined in. Ellie, my dear, I was wrong. Please. As we drove away, the finality of the moment weighed heavily on me, but a part of me craved closure, a definitive end to this chapter of my life. When we reached the end of the driveway, I asked my father to stop the car. Thinking this was his chance, Jack ran up to us, his face lit with hope, while his mother trailed behind, her earlier elegance replaced by desperation. Without a word, I rolled down the window, pulled off my wedding ring, and held it out. Jack's eyes widened as he realized what was about to happen. This is where it ends, Jack, I said, my voice steady. With that, I threw the ring out of the window. It glittered briefly in the morning sun before landing on the soft grass beside the road. Vivian, ever the opportunist, rushed to where the ring had fallen, her hands scrambling through the grass. I rolled up the window, shutting out their pleas and the painful past they represented. Let's go, Dad, I said quietly. 2 weeks later, I was back in the city, settled into a new apartment that felt more like home than I had in a long time. I returned to work, where Mr. Jackson welcomed me with open arms and a gentle understanding that eased my transition back into routine. Jack made several attempts to contact me, each one more desperate than the last. He claimed to have cut ties with his mother, begging for another chance, but some things, once broken, can't be mended. I told him it was over for good this time and blocked his number. No more words were needed.